Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully, everyone had a good lunch and now is ready to talk about some hybrid work and how we can better secure and optimize that environment. So I'm Melissa Stein, Director of End User Computing at AWS. I'm focused on new initiatives and have some great new things that we're going to launch in the future. But today we want to talk to you about how we can actually make this environment more secure, better optimized for what we have today. So I'd like to introduce a couple people that are joining with me on stage. So Josh?
Yeah, Josh Hartwig. I'm a Director in Associate Experience Technology at Capital One.
And I'm Steven Stetler. I'm a Senior End User Computing Specialist Solutions Architect with AWS now for a few years. Thanks.
Thank you. So let's quickly run through what we're going to be talking about today. So many of us have gone to hybrid work or even fully remote work. So we're going to talk about the value and also the challenges that are faced in that kind of environment. We'll walk through the various benefits of our end user computing services. And then Josh is going to talk about his story and his journey at Capital One, transforming to WorkSpaces. And then we'll wrap it all up. So let's go ahead and get started. 2019, you got in your car, you got on the train, you went to work pretty much every day. 2020, it all changed. If you were lucky enough to have a job that you could do remotely, you were doing it remotely. And then over the last 2 years, we've kind of settled somewhere in the middle. Some people fully remote, some hybrid. And we do this for a variety of reasons. Specifically, we want to make employees happy. We want to create work-life balance, or what we like to call work-life harmony. So a study this year from a very big tech company of 28,000 full-time employees said for those who could work from anywhere, 82% of them were happier. Happier people are more productive. And not only are they more productive, there's better retention. So the National Bureau of Economic Research says the quitting rates of people who can work in a hybrid environment is 35% less. Imagine if you could keep a third of your workforce that you have invested in and trained and have made domain experts stay around for much longer. And with all of that, there's flexibility. So we've seen the rise of short-term work, contract work, because these people may not be able to work full-time indefinitely, but yet they have so much to contribute to each of your companies. So while there's value for the employees, it's not without benefit for the companies themselves. So if you had to get your entire talent pool from 10 or 20 miles within your corporate office, or some kind of large office that you might have distributed around the world, you have a very slim pool from which to pick. When you think about remote and hybrid work, the world talent pool is your oyster. You can get the right people that you need to fulfill your open positions from anywhere else in the world. And these people can bring more diversity of thought, better processes, new creative ideas. Some of them may be traveling all around the world in more creative type roles, and they bring that life experience to them at the office. So according to Harvard Business Review, that did a study last year of diverse work environments, the 25% most diverse work environments were 36% more profitable. So there's an actual impact to the bottom line. And that impact on the bottom line can also be seen in other ways, very specific cost savings. So our customer, the University of Virginia, like many universities, has a lab, especially for students who need to have access to CAD or scientific or engineering applications. Well, they ran out of space. So they could either figure out some other place on the campus and build a new building, which is very expensive, or they could look to a more innovative route, which is what they did through application streaming. So those applications that their students needed to complete their coursework could now be made available to them on any laptop or PC that they were using for all of their regular essays and everything else that they would be doing. And I'm sure many of your companies, even Amazon, were rethinking real estate, right? Thinking about how we can create a more agile working environment so people can come together and collaborate without that huge real estate investment. And the other area where we're seeing cost savings is bring your own device. So many of us bring our own mobile phones, right? So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. That's been around for a while. But this is more bring your own laptop. So instead of having to spend $800 or $1,200 providing your employees with a laptop that in some cases, especially in certain industries, may never come back to you, and even as much as you have a whole team chasing them down, that device never comes back. So there's, again, cost savings to allowing people to use their own device. And when we think about this hybrid work environment, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So this is from Gallup, which is a very large research company in the US. They survey tens of thousands of people every quarter, and it's a company that's been around for about 90 years. So throughout the pandemic, post-pandemic, they've conducted this survey on what the actual work trends are and what the preferences are. So there's no surprise, right, that it's a little bit less fully remote now. But what's interesting is that the hybrid work and employee preferences that you see in the far column are about equaling out, right? We're really concerned about employees having a good work experience. But what's also interesting is that since October of 2021, that fully remote preference number, which is 34%, was only 17% a year ago. It's doubled. So once people got that taste of working fully remote, they did not want to give it up. So what does this mean? This means there's a hybrid, remote, changing, challenging environment that you all need to support. So let's talk about some of those challenges. Right, so when everyone went into the office and they were surrounded by the network perimeter and they were logging into the corporate network and everything was good, it wasn't that you didn't have a lot of work, but now it has increased so much. All those endpoint management processes you put in place, they've broken. Right? How many of you have tried to push a patch through a VPN-connected PC, right, to only find that that patch failed, right? And now you have a security vulnerability. People used to go into your office, they have some problem with some app or their laptop. There was a help desk. Now there's no help desk. Amazon, with just in a matter of weeks, had to transition everyone to a virtual help desk. And actually now, we've actually only brought back a few in-person help desks. We figured that we could handle a lot of these troubleshooting virtually. And then, of course, you had to get someone a laptop. You might have a new joiner, somebody broke their laptop and you need to replace it. But there were supply chain issues. We had many laptops stuck at the border, right? Stuck at customs. You couldn't even get that lap to someone. So what are you gonna do? So now you're like, okay, well, use your own laptop. But then there are security challenges. In fact, Aberdeen says that the end user endpoint is 4.5 times more likely to be breached than a server. So you got all these people out there downloading who knows what, and some of them are big attacks, right? Everyone's heard SolarWinds. But there's also a rise of insider threats. Last year, Robinhood had 7 million user accounts and personal information breached because a customer service rep was compromised. So there's definitely security should be top of mind when we think about hybrid working. And to compound this, of course, you've got to make everything easier, there's an IT talent shortage. According to Gartner, the #1 thing that keeps IT executives up at night is this talent shortage. It's keeping them from moving to being a digital workplace. It's keeping them from modernizing their apps and doing a lot of the automation that they want to do. And if you think specifically about cybersecurity professionals, there is only 68 qualified cybersecurity workers for every 100 open positions. So if you want job security, maybe thinking, oh, maybe IT's cool, you may want to go into cybersecurity. There is plenty of open positions. So now that we've talked about some of the challenges that are faced, let's start talking about solutions. And this is where Amazon offers the End User Computing service family. And I'll be going through the different services and talking about the different workloads that they can support. So first and foremost, we have WorkSpaces. This is most similar to a physical laptop PC. Everything is there exactly where you left it. So if someone's writing a line of code or writing a slide, wherever they left off, it's exactly there when they log back on. For those who only need a certain specific application, maybe a high-performance application being streamed to a low-performance device, for that, we have AppStream. And just last month, we launched WorkSpaces Core. For those of you who have been using a VDI environment already, because you understand some of the benefits of patching and management, you could bring that familiar client environment to a fully managed workspace. So if you're thinking the same thing like Horizon 8, don't have to change that experience for your users, but now the entire backend is fully managed in the cloud. And then about this time last year, we launched WorkSpaces Web, because we all know that more and more people are working in web-based applications, and you want to make sure that that environment is secure. So behind all of these is Amazon's secure, by default, infrastructure. It's always pay-as-you-go. It's available for what you need, when you need it, with a variety of instances, so whatever memory and compute combination works for you. And you can access that through a browser, through consoles, through APIs, and give you and your employees the flexibility that you need in this new modern working environment. So to kind of bring this home, let's talk a little bit about some of the workloads. So your typical knowledge worker, me, many of you, in IT, finance, marketing, they're going to want something that feels pretty much like a regular desktop. For that, again, we have WorkSpaces. If you need to do something like a Bastion or a Jump host, if you need to make available certain applications, or you have a task worker workload that, every day when they log back in, it's fine for them to have a new clean session. For that, we have AppStream. Now, when you think about browser-based workloads, again, you may be thinking, right, data entry, some small tools. But the reality is, salespeople, right? How many people here probably have their salespeople here? They're logging back in, trying to find their contacts in their CRM application. What was that data? Oh, I need to access that presentation, right? They're going back to the intranet. You want to make sure they can do that securely. Same thing for developers. Confluence, Jira, GitHub. Developers are using online tools. You don't necessarily want any of that source code on the endpoint. For that, we have WorkSpaces Web. So now that you have that kind of context of what's in the end user computing family, I want to go through each of these three key benefits. So first, we want to make sure that we can improve operational agility. IT job is hard enough. Let's make it a little simpler. So maybe you have a data center. Maybe you have 2 data centers. When everyone was on site, that worked, right? But now that people have gone all over, I personally know people who are now working from Hawaii, whether they're supposed to or not. I've also heard the Bahamas and Portugal are quite nice for remote work. Why have them connect all the way back to that data center when they could connect locally? So with this computing family, the end user computing service family, we have 15 different regions so that people can connect where they are doing their work. They have better access, higher performance to the data and applications they need. And just last week, we launched multi-region resilience. So in case something happens, an entire region goes down, and I'm not talking just availability zones within regions, which of course, we're automatically going to support that. But if some big disaster happens, we've now made it much easier to create and manage standby images for as little as $3 a user per month. So good peace of mind for wherever your workers are working around the world. So I'd like to take you a little bit more in depth into a couple different use cases. Developers. A lot of developers want to work on whatever device is comfortable. So they may use PC, they may use a Mac, but they're developing Windows apps, they're developing Linux apps, they're developing high-performance applications. Whatever system they're on, they can easily spin up and spin down an instance to test and develop what they need. And we just launched support for Ubuntu. So in addition to Windows and Amazon Linux, we now have Ubuntu support. So developers can have access to all the open source tools and libraries that they're familiar with, whether they're developing an AI, ML algorithm, or some kind of IoT, or any real cloud-based app that they're used to developing. And they can do that, as I mentioned, without any source code ever being on their endpoint. So your intellectual property is protected, and it's also protected in transit and at rest through our encryption. Now we have a couple customers, or actually we have a lot of customers who are doing this for developer workloads. One I'd like to mention is DocuSign. So DocuSign has contract developers all over the world. And so they are able to, through WorkSpaces, to allow those people to be productive and not have to worry about the security of their development environments. If we look into a very different workload, the call center, a customer service rep, right? Pre-pandemic, they would go into a room, often windowless room, no paper, no pen, no printing, definitely not their cell phone. They're not going to be able to bring their cell phone in. They're dealing with customer details. They're dealing with employee personal information. In some cases, they're dealing with protected health information. So our customer, Maximus, who's in that healthcare kind of communication services business. In fact, they're the ones that ran the COVID hotline during the heart of the pandemic, right? Because everyone wants that critical information. They had their customer service reps, again, all in these rooms. In just a matter of weeks, through WorkSpaces, they were able to move 25,000 call center agents to be able to work from home and keep that very important protected health information secure. And when your agents can actually work from home, in fact, retention rates can go up to 4x. So Pipkin, who I think outsources about 300,000 agents to various people, that's what they've seen. They've seen retention rates go up to 80% from as low as 25%, because they give people that flexibility, those agents the ability to work from home, but they do it in a way that is secure and trusted. So I'm just going to double click for a second into WorkSpaces Web. So as I said, right, there's an increase of web applications, of SaaS apps. According to Better Cloud, who just released their 2023, and yes, it's almost 2023, State of SaaS Ops report, 70% of all apps used in business are SaaS. So with WorkSpaces Web, every time your users log into a web session, they're presented a new instance with Chrome on it that is fully patched. So that means there's not going to be those security vulnerabilities and you're worried about the web or the browser being out of date. You can then apply up to 300 different policies for devices and users. You can decide what URLs they can and cannot go to. You can decide whether they can transfer files or print or use the clipboard or none of the above and completely lock it down. And because of this environment, this use of web-based tools, there's a very large analytics BI company that has just now deployed WorkSpaces Web across all 8,000 of its users, because it understands how important it is to have security around the web. Because when that user logs off with WorkSpaces Web, that instance is terminated. And again, they would have a fresh instance and a fresh version of Chrome the next time they log in. So I've talked a lot about commercial and enterprise businesses, but these services are also for ISVs. So some ISVs build very complicated applications that take a lot of time to learn, and they need to test, and the customers want to trial. So for example, we have a customer, SolidWorks, that builds 3D CAM. We have MathWorks that does MATLAB for material science. Through application streaming through AppStream, they can have all of their customers test out and trial their applications without having to download anything. And for those who are on their journey to make their applications cloud native, but are not quite ready or may not have the resources to do so, they can also use AppStream to make their app feel like a SaaS app. So those companies can focus on their business model, because it is a really big change, right? If you're selling everything perpetual license, you know when your revenue's coming in, and now all of a sudden your customers are demanding pay as you go, there's a lot of nuance to that. It's not that easy to get that right. So you can take the technology burden off the hands and go ahead and actually make that app feel like it's SaaS even when it's not. And that's what our customer IHS Markit did, who's now part of S&P Global with their Wall Street office app. And for some ISVs, they actually have a huge client base where they used to have to go in and touch and update all of the systems. So for example, our customer Exida, who's in automotive and energy consulting, they were doing just that. Their customers were having to procure, configure hardware, and then they were going ahead and installing the software, going on site. So, and then anytime they needed a feature change, they'd have to go back on site again. So with AppStream, they could just deploy those updates everywhere, and in a matter of minutes, the functionality was there for their customers, and they didn't have to maintain any of the systems. So again, I mentioned IT agility is about simplicity. So we have some of this out of the box. As I mentioned, there's a lot of pre-configured instances, from standard ones for productivity apps to high performance and graphical instances. But we also have things like auto-scaling policies. So whether that's by your capacity utilization or a schedule, can scale up or scale down. Through CloudWatch, we can monitor the health and availability of your workspaces, so you know exactly what's going on in your environment. And through APIs, you can automate some of the most common tasks. So whether you need to start or stop an instance or create an image, all of that can be automated. But we know that there's also a lot of tools that you've already invested in your ecosystem. So whether that's system configuration or device management tools, ticketing systems, application packaging tools, or just using GPOs to help apply policies to manage the workspaces or the users in a Windows workspace directory, we make sure that those integrations are available to you, so you can have what you need at your fingertips to support this very hybrid workforce. And as I mentioned, you want to be sure that they can have local connectivity, so you have the best performance to your data and your applications wherever your hybrid workforce resides. So right now we support 15 different regions with WorkSpaces and AppStream, the most recent of which we launched was Cape Town in South Africa. And as we hear from you, our customers, about different locations that you're in, that your employees are in, we'll continuously add new regions. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Josh to talk about his journey with Capital One.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming out. I had some new people come in. My name is Josh Hartwig from Associate Experience Technology in Capital One. A little bit about Capital One. We're a Fortune 100 company, founded in 1994. Top 10 US banks serving over 100 million customers. and a data technology pioneer in the financial services industry. And we went all in AWS in 2020, and that was a 5-year journey. What I want to talk about is our landscape before Amazon Workspaces. So as I mentioned, we went all in on AWS in 2020. I should have said with an asterisk. The EUC space was actually going in a different direction. We had some commitments before we went into AWS. And we're still in the cloud, so we were moving to a different cloud provider. But as we landed on that cloud provider, started implementing that, we started running into some challenges. One, the cloud provider had a pay up front model. So, we had to try to sit down and figure out every single year at the end of the year what the business was going to do in advance. And for any large business, any business, it's almost impossible to figure that out, especially in changing business markets and times like this. Limited API capabilities. There was integrations, but the integrations were for software that we didn't use or we knew other customers didn't use. The API that we were using was poorly documented, and the solution didn't scale. We were constantly bringing in new third parties, and it would take months for us to get new capacity. So all of that added up to some big request backlogs. Now, again, it was great. We were in the cloud, but we have some of the same problems we would have had being on-premise. So we had to go back to the drawing board and really sit down and ground out our requirements. And the requirements that came up after we spent a lot of time was the forefront of our number one requirement was automation. Customers shouldn't have to wait for a new VDI. As we do acquisitions, customers shouldn't have to, our business partners shouldn't have to wait for months to get capacity. Scalability, the solution should scale with us, both up and down. That had been a challenge in advance when we were purchasing capacity up front for an entire year. And, in some cases, we would have capacity just sitting there. Pay as you go instead of pay up front. So in those use cases that I just described, where somebody would only use a VDI for a month or two, we'd be paying for an entire year. So ease of use, it should be easy for the customers to use. It should be easy for us to administer. And cost, and these are not necessarily in order. A lot of these are just key requirements that we had. So moving forward, we had our requirements set, and we went back, like I said, we went back to the drawing board. With Capital One going all in AWS, within the EUC space, we had a bit of autonomy. It wasn't a given that we were going to go to AWS. It made a lot of sense, but it wasn't necessarily an absolute requirement, being that we dealt with client OSs. So we took a look at all the different players in the space. We did various proof of concepts, but Workspaces came up time and time again. It came down to APIs, the capabilities, the scaling that we knew from moving into AWS with other products. And it definitely helped that Capital One had invested, talent and resources into tooling. So we wrapped up our proof of concepts and we landed on Workspaces. So building our solution, this is a pretty standard slide. This was during COVID. We kicked off our project. We did our internal governance reviews, cybersecurity reviews, and then we started doing proof of concepts with various customers. Sizing different workloads for different work, for different use cases. As we were doing that proof of concept work and sizing this different workloads, though, we kicked off the automation development. That was such a pain point for us in our previous solutions that we wanted it out the gate when we launched. We knew that if we didn't have that out the gate, it's one of those things where other things come up and you need developer resources and you might not have them. And so we knew at launch time we wanted all the automation and we wanted people to be able to request workspaces. So with that in process, we got to our user acceptance testing and basically settled on what types of workspaces our customers wanted. And then we hit our workspaces rollout, and it actually launched at the start of this year. And we had, I don't know, thousands of pre-existing VDIs that needed to be migrated. But our first use case was actually an odd one that we had not anticipated, and it was Apple's move from Intel-based silicon to M1 architecture. We had thousands and thousands of developers that were using VMware Fusion locally that could not move to M1s, and we were moving to M1s. So with Workspaces stood up, it was actually a really easy integration. We didn't have to really sit down and think like, hey, what are we going to do to onboard 2,000 or 3,000 users? We basically pointed them to a web page, put together some documentation, sent them to our request portal. In 2 months, it was done. And customers were able to, replicate that environment in Workspaces. And, with the added benefit that these things are always patched, they're always on. So it's a great story. So impact. After migrating users from our legacy platform to Amazon Workspaces, we went from a 3-day manually provisioning turnaround to a fully automated zero-touch Amazon Workspaces provisioning process. By automating Amazon Workspaces provisioning, what used to take us days now takes us less than an hour. So what is our landscape now? Capital One is a big tech company. We don't use a lot of VDI internally. We mostly support third parties. But we're seeing a growth even internally for folks like developers, 30% growth. And we attribute a lot of that to the ease of use. Better agility. Our customers can scale. We can do acquisitions, scale up and down as needed. And self-service, all in the customer's hands. They're able to provision, restart. The help desk is able to do all those capabilities. All that has led to a massive reduction in support costs. So where are we going? Solutions at the perimeter. Melissa hit on some of this. We want our business partners to be able to connect to us securely over the internet. We want to enable a bring your own policy, and Workspaces and WorkSpaces Web are going to be at the forefront of that. And support for thinner solutions. As we see an increase in VDI usage, we're able to kind of get away from the device and switch to a thinner device, and we see that in our future. So some key takeaways. For us, it was grounding our requirements and focusing on what was most important to us. Partner closely with cyber and IAM, understand the pros and cons of the licensing, and engage pro services as needed. We worked very closely with them on developing our solution, and it was a great success story. And that's it. Thank you.
One of the chief things we do at AWS is we say security is job zero. And that is absolutely true with end user computing here. Think about the security challenges you have. If you're a VDI administrator today, the amount of work that would go into building this secure service and making it public for your employees to connect in remotely, that can be a really intimidating hill to climb. And we have built into our services all those considerations. It's an opportunity to inherit just the scale that we operate at with all the security best practices bundled in. Granted, we do work on a shared responsibility model, thinking about the fact that a lot of the work is already built and you are standing on the shoulders of these security experts that have done all this. So the kinds of things you might worry about, like your attack surface, right? Do I have top talent on hand from a security perspective to ensure all of these things are locked down. And just your documentation practices, that's something that can be hard to establish. And we're already bringing that to the table. There are so many considerations aside from that as well. How are you protecting your data? You don't want your data to leave the network. If users are connecting today with laptops through VPN, what's happening is that data is transferring across the internet. Granted, it's in a secure tunnel in the VPN, but thinking about what's even more secure is it never leaving the perimeter of your network. You may also work for a company that has compliance obligations, right? And we have over 200 compliance certifications that we have, you will inherit just by adopting our services. And because these are standard operating systems and tools, everything you're doing today to configure for the operating system and your applications can easily be brought to the cloud in AWS and used there continually. Companies really do need to accelerate to that zero trust model, right? How do I ensure that this user is who they say they are so I can entitle them to resources? You may have a really complex security paradigm, right? Where you authenticate and do some posture checks, but we've already built a lot of that into the service, and we can plug in a lot of that as well. We have partner networks that we work with. There is no shortage of opportunities. So you can already start to think that you had all of these challenges just by onboarding to our services. You can flatten those challenges to the important things, which really make end users want to use a desktop in the cloud, applications in the cloud, and that's really just the experience, fine-tuning the experience, not having to have the security wherewithal and recreate something that we've already established and proven time and time again in years. Data is not stored on the connecting device. That is one of the most important takeaways. It's simply a pixel stream going across the internet that is fully encrypted. You cannot man in the middle our streaming protocols. So that helps to basically ensure that the data, even if this stream were interrupted, nothing can get exposed, and there's really no concern about that. But also in the cloud, we have a lot of tools to make sure that your desktops in the cloud, that your VDI, if you will, is secured. We have encryption at rest and in transit. We integrate with AWS key management services, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And our protocols are also encrypted. The storage volume itself, like I said, is KMS. It can be the default key. It could be a customer managed key that you bring in, and this will be for the volumes of the operating system and the user data. User data that is stored for AppStream 2.0 at rest is also secured in S3 using that encryption. We do enable the patching of the Windows operating system by default. However, you likely already have a patch management system. You can leverage that, right? We want to make this as simple to manage as you're used to managing today. With Amazon AppStream 2.0, we actually have something called managed image updates, where you have your custom image that's sealed, and you go through the console, select the action to create an up-to-date image, and it will patch everything for you. Of course, you're still responsible for the applications because that is part of the customer shared responsibility side, where you just make sure your applications are up to date. We will expect to work with you on things like making sure antivirus is installed, because this is just normal operating system types of procedures. So any antivirus you use today, bring it with you to the cloud. Any endpoint protection, you can bring it, and it will still continue to be honored. These are managed services, so you're not thinking about standing up unified access gateways or NetScalers. We bring that to you. There's no additional service for that. It's all included in the service. So that means that you don't have to configure those very difficult, challenging settings for those access gateways and then think, oh, version controls, upgrading. We're handling all of that, making it a lot easier to just know that your authentication and your streaming traffic, which are going to be encrypted, are already managed and highly available. There are a lot of tools that we have available, a lot of ways to skin the cat here for that second factor of authentication. We support Radius for those old infrastructure that you have today, but we also support SAML 2.0 identity providers. In addition to that, we have other ways of trusting a device, like client certificates that you issue to the device can be another way of saying that this is an acceptable endpoint. Smart card authentication, right? We support CAC and PIV cards for smart card. And also something called IP access controls, right? So if you know the public endpoint of where users are connecting from, obviously your users are working from home, that's not the best example, but you have a call center that's coming in, remote agents, they work from a certain building, you can say these endpoints can only be accessed from this IP range, or denied, likewise. Another thing is with SAML 2.0 identity providers, you probably already have a lot of this security posture created. So what you can do is inherit that into your Amazon WorkSpaces, Amazon AppStream 2.0 deployment so they stop the authentication early before they can even get to the endpoint. You can use CloudWatch events if you're familiar with that. We have a WorkSpaces access event, for instance, that you can log that information as it's coming in. And if you've ever chained Lambda and you have SNS, you can create alerts and you can create triggers that will perform functions based off where the user's connecting from, which can be inferred from their public IP address. You can build on these things, and I think that's what we were talking about earlier, about the power of this is just an API. Everything with EUC services here is going to be an API-driven activity. So you can log that. It's in CloudTrail, so you have that entire log. EventBridge, all of these things that are happening, you can trigger off of and create security paradigms from. And then, of course, there's also network access controls on your subnets. There are the security groups that are applied to the ENIs, the Elastic Network Interfaces, on the EUC endpoints themselves. And then maybe you have a firewall. Maybe it's third party, or maybe it's AWS Network Firewall. There are a lot of blogs about ways to secure. But the point is all of these things exist in your virtual private clouds today are inherited on the end user computing that you stack on top of your antivirus, your data leakage prevention software, all the things you have today to create a wholly secure environment. So I talked earlier about compliance. I said we have over 200. Here are some examples, SOCs 1, 2, and 3, and just the whole alphabet soup of the security. I'm never good at remembering all of them, of course. But yes, PCI, DSS level 1 compliance, FedRAMP, moderate and high. We have a full list of everything. Of course, if you're familiar with AWS Artifact in the AWS console, you can go there and get all the attestations and just review all those things. But now, on the spending.
Thank you, Stephen. Part of this that matters so much right now is cost containment, right? The economy, it's a little variable. So how can you go ahead and optimize your costs when you think about your end user computing environment? Well, you don't necessarily have to invest in all of that capital expenditure, all those servers, all the facilities that house those servers, all the utilities, all the people that have to maintain them, right? If you were going to use a traditional VDI environment, you're going to want to forecast that out 5, 10 years, right? Because you're making a huge capital investment. What if things change? What if the macroeconomic conditions change? You're still going to have all of those systems. So with these end user computing services, we turn CapEx into OpEx. It's fully managed, fully supported, We handle all these servers for you. We make sure that they're always available. And then all you have to do is pay as you go with a fully transparent bill that you know exactly what you had turned on in any given month, with everything right there at your fingertips. And again, as demands change, as the economy changes, you can scale up or scale down as you need to. And with this, we have a variety of pricing models. And they differ by the workspace, the AppStream, or the WorkSpaces Web service. So if you have people who are doing this as reusing their cloud desktop as their full-time job, you may want to go monthly. If you have more variability in either access to certain instances or even part-time workers, there's hourly. And because we want to save costs for you, we offer WorkSpaces Cost Optimizer. It will automatically shift you to a more cost-effective approach by monitoring your usage patterns. Now with AppStream 2.0, it's more of a usage-based than a per-user model. So whether you make those applications always available, you only need them, as we talked about, to run a course, or run a class, or have someone trial, you can just use hourly. And then last year, we launched Elastic Fleets. So if you want the most precise type of pricing, which can only happen is when you access that application, that instance is spun up for you, you only have to pay on a per second billing increment. Then with WorkSpaces Web, right, everyone uses the web. We wanted to make it super simple. So it's a flat user fee of only $7 a month per user. Again, the right cost model for the right workload, depending on what your needs are, in a way that you can go ahead and save as much money as possible. So let's talk about some more about what our customers are experiencing. So we have customers of all sizes. So for example, Feral Gas, who delivers propane, they have customer service reps, and a lot of them are in rural spaces. By using WorkSpaces, it was actually 85% faster than when they were connecting to their information to kind of run their service calls through a VPN. Fox. All heard Fox News. In fact, I was just meeting with Fox. They had to, during the pandemic, make sure that their stations stayed up, right? You don't want your news to go down. You need to make sure that broadcast maintains. They were able with WorkSpaces to be able to send all those people home, and the information that's trusted was always still available so that they could get broadcast. All the stations are online all the time. You take another company like Acuity that has a BYOD model. So they are using bring their own device for their developers. And they're in the space of research and analytics for the financial services industry. They have analysts all over the globe that service their clients. Through WorkSpaces, they were able to do that and do it securely. And this is just a touch of the value that people are experiencing through these end user computing services, and some of just the points of just some of the tens of thousands of customers that we have using these today. So let me go ahead and wrap it up. Right? You have a remote. You have a hybrid working environment. You want to give your workforce that flexibility to use any device from anywhere while it's secure. Whether you corporate manage that device, whether you allow people to use their own device, they should be able to access their desktop so they can do their job in just a matter of minutes. And you want to think about how you can use these to actually reduce your investments in that, either whether it's in physical devices, whether that's in the supporting infrastructure, or whether that's actually in the real estate itself. And as your business changes, and hopefully all of you are scaling up, but maybe you're just shifting clients. Maybe it's just other shifts of demand, or you're just changing developing environments. It should be able to scale up and scale down as you need to, using all the familiar tools that you've come to know and love in supporting your end user computing environment, and in a way that is fully managed. So if this piqued your interest about our end user computing services. We would love to have you come join us for a cocktail reception tomorrow evening. Yes, this is probably going to be the most used QR code because everyone does like cocktails. We also have a lot of other sessions happening. This is one of 18 sessions, some of which are recorded because they've already occurred. The general manager of all of End User Computing is speaking at the Venetian at 5 p.m. today if you want to look into the future of these services and see what our future strategy is. But again, we do have a variety of hands-on, workshop, and other sessions. In fact, Steven's about to give one in just a half an hour from now. But if you want to learn more, of course, help build your skills with AWS. If it's time for you to get certified because you feel that you know these services, you can just really quickly click on these QR codes and find out more about how to either get more education or get your certification. And on that note, on behalf of Steven, Josh, and I, thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us. I hope you found this very informative. And please do fill out the survey, the session survey response. So thank you again. We are going to stay up for questions. If anyone has any questions, we can stay up for the next few minutes, and we'll also kind of hang around in case anyone would like to come up to us directly. So again, thank you.